A missed appointment, a single photograph. That's all it took to shatter a picture-perfect life. For Olivia, it was the day of her baby's first ultrasound, a day her billionaire husband, Richard, swore he wouldn't miss. But while she was alone in that cold, sterile room, he was somewhere else entirely. He was on a sun-drenched beach, his arm wrapped not around his pregnant wife, but around a woman the world would soon know. He thought his secrets were safe, buried under piles of money. He had no idea he was married to a woman who was about to make him headline news. The silence in the ultrasound room was a living thing. It was a cold, clinical hum that seemed to amplify the frantic thumping of Olivia's own heart. She stared at the large monitor, a blank grey screen that held the promise of her future, a future she was supposed to be sharing. Her hand, trembling slightly, rested on the curve of her stomach. 4 months. 4 months of morning sickness, of strange cravings, and of a burgeoning love so fierce it almost frightened her. "He's just running a little late, I'm sure," Dr. Evans said, her voice a practiced, soothing melody that did nothing to calm the storm in Olivia's chest. "Richard is a busy man." Olivia forced a smile, a brittle thing that felt like it might crack her face. "Yes, always busy." She had repeated that phrase so many times, it had become a mantra, an excuse, a shield. Richard Sterling, the real estate mogul, the darling of Wall Street, the man whose face was plastered on the cover of Forbes, was always busy. His time was measured in millions of dollars, in deals that shaped the city's skyline. She knew that. She had accepted that. But today was supposed to be different. He had promised. "Live my love," he'd said just last night, his voice a low, intoxicating rumble as he traced the line of her jaw. "Nothing in this world would make me miss seeing our baby for the first time. I'll move mountains. I'll reschedule the mare. That's our moment." His words, like everything else about him, had been perfect. Richard was a master architect, not just of buildings, but of moments. Their life together was a carefully constructed masterpiece of glamour and romance. Spontaneous trips to Paris on his private jet, front row seats at New York Fashion Week, whispered sweet nothings over candle-lit dinners at restaurants, so exclusive they didn't have names. He had swept into her life a whirlwind of charm and power, and she, a quiet, unassuming librarian, had been caught up in the storm, dizzy with a happiness she'd never imagined possible. But lately the perfection had started to feel fragile. There were the hushed phone calls he would take in the other room, the sudden business trips that seemed to pop up with alarming frequency. When she'd asked, he'd smiled, that disarming smile of his, the one that made her feel silly and paranoid. "Just putting out fires, my love. The price of success." And she had believed him. She wanted to believe him. An hour passed. The grey screen remained blank. Dr. Evans, her professional patience wearing thin, suggested they reschedule. Olivia felt a hot flush of shame. The other women in the waiting room with their proud, beaming partners had glanced at her with a mixture of pity and curiosity. The pregnant wife of the billionaire, all alone. "No, let's just do it," Olivia said, her voice barely a whisper. She couldn't bear the thought of coming back, of reliving this humiliation. She needed to see her baby. She needed to know that one thing at least was real. The cold gel on her stomach was a shock. She flinched as Dr. Evans moved the transducer. And then it happened. A flicker on the screen. A tiny pulsating shape. A sound filled the room, a rhythmic, powerful whooshing that was the most beautiful thing she had ever heard. "There's the heartbeat," Dr. Evans said, her voice softening with genuine warmth. "Strong and steady. Congratulations, Olivia. You have a very healthy baby." Tears streamed down Olivia's face, hot and silent. It was a girl, her daughter. In that moment, the ache of Richard's absence was a sharp, physical pain, a gaping wound in what should have been a perfect memory. She took the grainy, black-and-white photos, her fingers caressing the image of the tiny life inside her. She sent him a text. "We saw her today. She's perfect." The reply came hours later, a terse, impersonal message. "Knew she would be. So sorry, Liv. Got dragged into an emergency meeting with investors from Dubai. Still locked in. We'll make it up to you, I promise." The disappointment was a bitter pill. She tried to swallow it to be the understanding wife she had always been. She drew a bath in their palatial penthouse apartment, the city lights twinkling below like a carpet of fallen stars. She tried to focus on the joy on the little girl who was now her entire world, but the unease lingered a shadow she couldn't shake. It was that night as she mindlessly scrolled through her phone, a habit she'd picked up to fill the long, lonely evenings that the shadow took form. It started as a knot in her stomach, a prickle of dread. Her friend Maya had sent her a link to a popular Instagram gossip account, one that chronicled the lives of the rich and shameless. The caption was innocuous: "Another day in paradise." But the picture stole the air from her lungs. It was a selfie, a sun-drenched, carefree selfie taken on a pristine white sand beach. In the foreground, a woman with a mane of platinum blonde hair and a predatory smile pouted at the camera. Her name was Chloe Vanderbilt, a socialite and so-called influencer whose manufactured life was a constant source of tabloid fodder. But it wasn't Chloe's face that made Olivia's world tilt on its axis. It was the man beside her. He was shirtless, his skin bronzed, a pair of expensive sunglasses perched on his head. His arm was wrapped possessively around Chloe's waist, his hand splayed possessively on her hip. He was smiling a wide, genuine, unguarded smile that Olivia hadn't seen in months. It was Richard. The phone slipped from her numb fingers, clattering onto the marble floor. The emergency meeting with Dubai investors. The city skyline behind him wasn't Dubai. It wasn't even New York. It was the unmistakable turquoise water and lush green hills of St. Bart's. The lie was so audacious, so brazen it was almost comical. He hadn't just missed the most important day of her life. He had been with another woman. He had posted the evidence for the world to see, a digital middle finger to her and their unborn child. The heartbreak was a tidal wave, a crushing force that left her gasping for breath. But as the initial shock subsided, something else began to bubble up from the depths of her despair. It was a cold, hard fury, an emotion so intense it burned away the tears. He had underestimated her. He had seen her as a quiet, compliant accessory to his perfect life. He had never bothered to look deeper, to see the steel beneath the silk. He thought he could break her heart and walk away unscathed. That night, lying alone in their king-sized bed, the city lights mocking her with their cold, indifferent beauty, Olivia made a promise to herself and to the tiny, sleeping life inside her. Richard Sterling wanted to be famous. He loved the spotlight. Well, she was about to give him the performance of a lifetime. He didn't know it yet, but he had just become the star of a new story, and she would be the one writing the headlines. The first 24 hours were a blur of managed hysteria. Olivia moved through the opulent emptiness of the penthouse like a ghost, her every action mechanical. She made coffee she didn't drink. She stared out at the panoramic view of Central Park without seeing it. The picture on her phone was a brand on her mind, seared into her memory with the heat of betrayal. Richard, Chloe, St. Bart's, her husband, the man who had vowed to cherish her, was a liar, and not just a simple liar, but one of breathtaking arrogance. The sheer audacity of it was what kept replaying in her mind. He hadn't even bothered to be discreet. It was a public declaration of his infidelity, a smug display of his power. He believed he was untouchable, that his wealth and status were a shield that made him invulnerable to consequences. His texts started coming in a steady stream, a pathetic attempt at damage control. Liv just landed back in NY. Meeting was a killer. I'm exhausted. Heading straight to the office. So much to catch up on. Can't wait to see you tonight. I've missed you. Each message was a fresh twist of the knife. She didn't reply. Her silence was a new and unfamiliar weapon, and she wielded it with a chilling precision. Let him wonder. Let him sweat. For the first time in their relationship, she had the upper hand, and she had no intention of relinquishing it. That afternoon, the doorbell chimed a sharp, intrusive sound that shattered the funereal silence. It was Maya, her best friend, since their college days, a fiery, no-nonsense lawyer with a bullshit detector that was second to none. She took one look at Olivia's pale, tear-streaked face and enveloped her in a hug that was fierce and protective. I saw it. Maya said, her voice laced with a venom that was strangely comforting. That scumbag. That narcissistic, fame-hungry pig. I swear, Olivia, I will personally key his precious Bugatti. Olivia let out a choked laugh that was half a sob. Don't bother. It's probably a lease. Maya pulled back her sharp, intelligent eyes, scanning Olivia's face. What are you going to do? I don't know, Olivia whispered the confession, a painful admission of her own helplessness. He owns everything. This apartment, the cars, the bank accounts. I'm a librarian, Maya. I have a savings account with $3,000 in it. You have more than that, Maya said, her voice firm. You have a prenuptial agreement. I read every single word of that document before I let you sign it. It's ironclad. He might be a bastard, but his lawyers are meticulous. There's an infidelity clause. A big one. The prenup. Olivia had almost forgotten about it. At the time, it had seemed like a cold, cynical document, a jarring intrusion into their fairy tale romance. Richard had dismissed it as a mere formality, a piece of paper for the bean counters. Now it was her only life raft in a sea of uncertainty. But I'll have to prove it. Olivia said, the practicalities of the situation crashing down on her. He'll deny it. He'll say the picture is old, that it's photoshopped. He'll hire the best lawyers in the city to paint me as a hysterical gold-digging wife. Let him try, Maya said, a predatory glint in her eye. Public opinion is a powerful thing, Liv. And right now, public opinion is not on his side. She pulled out her tablet, her fingers flying across the screen. She brought up the gossip site, the comments section, a raging dumpster fire of public outrage, while his pregnant wife is at home. What a pig, Chloe Vanderbilt, is a notorious home wrecker. No surprise there. I hope his wife takes him to the cleaners. The comments were a balm to her wounded soul. She wasn't alone. The world saw him for what he was. But it wasn't enough. A few nasty comments on a gossip blog wouldn't bring down a man like Richard Sterling. He would weather the storm, release a carefully crafted PR statement, and in a few weeks the world would move on to the next scandal. I need more than just a picture, Maya. Olivia said, her voice growing stronger, a new and unfamiliar resolve taking root in the ashes of her heartbreak. I need something he can't deny, something that will ruin him. Maya looked at her, a slow, admiring smile spreading across her face. There's the Olivia I know, the one who aced her thesis on investigative journalism. You've been playing the part of the dutiful wife for so long, I think you forgot who you really are. It was true. She had submerged her own identity in her own ambitions and passions, taking a back seat to his all-consuming career. She had become an extension of him, a beautifully dressed accessory on his arm, and in doing so she had given him all the power. No more. His entire life is a lie. Maya. Olivia said, her mind racing the pieces of a puzzle she hadn't even realized she was solving starting to click into place. The charity work for his foundation, the ethical sourcing of his building materials, the carefully cultivated image of a self-made man. It's all a facade. I've seen things. I've overheard conversations. I never put it all together. She thought of the late-night meetings with men in expensive suits who looked more like gangsters than businessmen. The hushed, cryptic phone calls about zoning variances and political donations. The second set of accounting books she'd accidentally stumbled upon in his home office, which he'd quickly explained away as creative tax strategies. At the time, she had chosen to believe him to turn a blind eye to the darkness that lurked beneath the glittering surface of their life. Now she saw it all with a terrifying clarity. He's not just a cheater, Maya. Olivia said, her voice a low, dangerous whisper. He's a crook, and I'm going to expose him for what he really is. The decision once made was like a shot of adrenaline. The grief was still there, a dull, throbbing ache in her chest. But it was now overlaid with a new and exhilarating sense of purpose. She was no longer a victim. She was a woman on a mission. That evening, when Richard finally came home, he found her sitting in the living room, bathed in the soft glow of a single lamp. She looked calm, composed, almost serene. He, on the other hand, was a mess. His tie was loosened, his hair was disheveled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Liv. He began, his voice thick with a carefully rehearsed contrition. I am so sorry. I know I messed up. The meeting. It was a nightmare. I should have been there. I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you. She looked at him, her gaze cool and steady. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She simply held up her phone, the picture of him and Chloe displayed on the screen. The color drained from his face. He stared at the image, his jaw working for a long, silent moment. The mask of the charming, devoted husband slipped, and for the first time, she saw the real Richard Sterling. He was cold, calculating, and utterly ruthless. You should have been more careful, she said, her voice as calm and quiet as the eye of a hurricane. Social media is a tricky thing. He let out a short, humorless laugh. Don't be naive, Olivia. You think a silly picture is going to hurt me. I'll have my PR team issue a statement. We'll say it was a business trip, that Chloe is a client. It will all blow over. I'm sure it will, she said, standing up, the movement fluid and graceful. She walked to the window, her back to him, and looked out at the city that he believed he owned. But this isn't about the picture, Richard. This is about everything else. He frowned, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. What are you talking about? She turned to face him, a small, enigmatic smile playing on her lips. You really should be more careful about the things you leave lying around your office. Zoning variances, political donations, creative tax strategies. It's all so fascinating. The blood drained from his face. He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in years. And in her eyes, he didn't see the quiet, adoring wife he had married. He saw a stranger, a formidable, intelligent, and very, very angry stranger. What have you done? He whispered, his voice hoarse, with a dawning, horrified realization. Nothing yet, she said, her smile widening. But the night is young, and I have a feeling tomorrow's headlines are going to be very, very interesting. The penthouse, once a symbol of her gilded cage, transformed into Olivia's strategic command center. The initial dizzying rush of defiance had settled into a cold, calculated resolve. She was no longer just a scorned wife. She was an intelligence operative deep in enemy territory. Every creak of the floorboards, every chime of the elevator sent a jolt of adrenaline through her veins. Richard was home less and less consumed with what he called damage control for the St. Bart's photo, a firestorm that his PR team was struggling to extinguish. This gave Olivia the time she needed. With Maya acting as her handler on the outside, they began to map out their strategy. He's arrogant, Maya had said during one of their encrypted calls, and arrogant men get sloppy. He won't believe you have the guts or the intelligence to actually do anything. Use that. Olivia did. She played the part of the wounded, withdrawn wife to perfection. She was quiet, tearful, and seemingly broken. When Richard was home, she would flinch from his touch, her silence a constant passive-aggressive rebuke that fed his ego. He saw her as defeated, which was precisely what she wanted. Her first target was his home office. It was his sanctuary, a sleek, minimalist space with floor-to-ceiling windows and a desk carved from a single piece of obsidian. It was where he held his most secret meetings and took his most cryptic calls. She had a key, of course, but he'd recently installed a new state-of-the-art security system with a keypad. For days, she watched him, her mind a sponge absorbing every detail. She noticed he would often tap his fingers on the table when he was thinking a nervous, rhythmic pattern. One evening, as he was distracted by a furious phone call with his publicist, she watched from the doorway as he absently tapped out the code on the desk before entering it into the keypad. It was a sequence of 8 digits, the date of his first major real estate acquisition. It was so perfectly, narcissistically him. The next day, as soon as he left for the office, she was inside. The room smelled of him. Expensive cologne and an undercurrent of metallic tension. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she began her search. She wasn't looking for paper. Richard was too smart for that. Everything was digital, protected by layers of encryption. Her librarian skills, once a source of gentle mockery for Richard's high-flying friends, were now her sharpest weapon. She knew how to find information, how to see patterns in chaos. She remembered stumbling upon a strange-looking external hard drive a few months ago, tucked away in a drawer of his antique Globe bar. He had snatched it from her, his reaction unusually sharp, saying it was a backup of old family photos. It was the only time he had ever seemed genuinely rattled by her presence in his office. It was still there, nestled between a bottle of 25-year-old Macallan and a set of crystal tumblers. It was a sleek silver rectangle, no bigger than a deck of cards. Plugging it into his desktop, she was met with a password prompt. She tried the usuals: his birthday, her birthday, their anniversary, the name of his first company. Nothing. Frustration gnawed at her. She sat in his leather chair, the silence of the apartment pressing in on her. What was the one thing he loved more than his money, more than his own reflection, his legacy, the narrative he had so carefully constructed? She thought back to their first date, how he had spoken with such passion about the Sterling Tower, the gleaming skyscraper that was his crowning achievement. He had called it his true north. She typed the words into the password field, True North 212. The drive unlocked. It was a labyrinth of folders and subfolders, a digital maze of shell corporations, offshore accounts and encrypted ledgers. It was the second set of books she had glimpsed, but on a scale she could never have imagined. This wasn't just creative tax strategy. This was a massive, sophisticated web of fraud, bribery, and money laundering. Millions of dollars siphoned from company accounts, moved through a series of untraceable transactions, and funneled into the pockets of city officials, zoning board members, and union bosses. She found a folder labeled Project Nightingale. Inside was a detailed accounting of payments made to a shell corporation, which in turn had made a series of political donations to Councilman Robert Jennings, a man who had been instrumental in pushing through the zoning changes for Richard's latest luxury development. It was a clear, undeniable case of bribery. Her hands trembled as she copied the files onto a new encrypted thumb drive she had purchased with cash. This was it. This was more than just a messy divorce. This was a federal crime. But as she was about to eject the drive, a different folder caught her eye. It was labeled Chloe. Her breath hitched. Against her better judgment, she clicked it open. It wasn't love letters or romantic photos. It was a series of wire transfers, monthly payments of $50,000 sent to Chloe Vanderbilt for the past 2 years. The memo on each transfer was the same consulting fee. And then she saw the contract, a non-disclosure agreement signed by Chloe that essentially paid her to be Richard's public girlfriend. The contract stipulated a certain number of public appearances, a steady stream of social media posts, and absolute discretion about the true nature of their arrangement. It was a business transaction. Even his affair was a carefully managed illusion. The realization didn't lessen the pain, but it sharpened her anger into a diamond-hard point. He hadn't just betrayed her. He had cheapened the very idea of love and affection, reducing it to another line item on his balance sheet. As she was absorbing this new, sickening revelation, she heard a sound that made her blood run cold. The chime of the private elevator. He was back. Her mind raced. She couldn't be found here. Not now. She hastily ejected the thumb drive, shoved it into her pocket, and tried to close the folders, but her fumbling fingers betrayed her. The Chloe folder was still open on the screen. She shut down the computer, praying it would be fast enough. The sound of his key in the front door was a death knell. She slipped out of the office, closing the door silently behind her, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was halfway down the hall when he walked in, his face a thunderous mask. "What were you doing?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. I was looking for a book," she stammered, her mind seizing on the first plausible lie. "I thought I left one in there." His eyes, cold and assessing, swept over her, then flickered towards the office door. He walked past her into the room she had just vacated. She stood frozen in the hallway, every muscle tensed. She heard the soft whir of the computer booting up, a silence that stretched for an eternity. When he emerged, his face was unreadable. He looked at her, a long, searching gaze that seemed to peel back the layers of her deception. She braced herself for the explosion, for the accusations, for the end of the charade. But instead he smiled. It was a slow, chilling smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Find your book," he asked, his voice smooth as silk. "No," she whispered. It wasn't there. "Too bad," he said, walking towards her. He reached out and tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, his touch unexpectedly gentle. "You look tired, Liv. Why don't you go lie down? I'll have dinner sent up." It was a dismissal, a threat wrapped in a velvet glove. He knew, or he suspected, and he was letting her know that he was watching. The game had changed. He was no longer underestimating her. He was hunting her. As she walked to their bedroom on unsteady legs, the encrypted thumb drive in her pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She had the ammunition she needed to destroy him. But now it was a race against time. She had to get it to someone who could use it before he found a way to silence her for good. The air in the penthouse had become thin and sharp, each breath a calculated risk. Richard's feigned gentleness was far more terrifying than any overt rage. He moved around the apartment with a predatory grace, his eyes constantly following her. He would ask casual questions about her day, about her phone calls, about her conversations with Maya. It was a subtle psychological water torture designed to make her break. She knew her digital footprint was being monitored, her phone likely bugged. The game had escalated, and she was running out of moves. "You can't do this alone anymore," Maya insisted, during a hushed meeting in a noisy coffee shop, a place so public and mundane she hoped it was safe. "You need to get that drive to a professional, someone he can't buy or intimidate." There was only one name that came to mind: Thea Gallo. Gallo was a legend, an old-school investigative journalist with a Pulitzer Prize and a reputation for being a bulldog. She had taken down corrupt senators, exposed corporate malfeasance at the highest levels, and was famously immune to the charms and threats of powerful men. Her column in the New York Chronicle was a weekly dose of righteous fury that struck fear into the hearts of the city's elite. Richard hated her. He had once called her a bitter, sanctimonious harpy after she'd written a scathing piece about the tax breaks given to his company. Contacting her was the next challenge. Olivia couldn't use her own phone or email. She went to a public library, a place that felt like a return to a former, safer self, and used a computer to create an anonymous email address. Her message was brief and cryptic. Subject Project Nightingale. I have information about Richard Sterling, information he would kill to keep quiet. If you want the biggest story of your career, meet me. Friday, 4 p.m. The Folly. The Folly was a forgotten, graffiti-covered ruin in Central Park, a decorative structure from the 19th century that was now little more than a curiosity for tourists. It was open public, yet offered enough secluded corners to have a conversation without being easily seen. She signed the email Cassandra, the Trojan princess cursed to speak the truth but never be believed. It felt fitting. The 2 days leading up to the meeting were the longest of her life. She felt Richard's suspicion like a physical weight, his presence a constant, suffocating pressure. He suggested they go away for the weekend to their house in the Hamptons. Just the two of us, he'd said, his voice laced with a meaning that made her skin crawl. We need to reconnect. She made an excuse, a checkup with Dr. Evans she couldn't possibly miss. The lie felt flimsy, and she saw a flicker of cold anger in his eyes before he masked it with a sigh of disappointment. On Friday, She dressed in the most anonymous clothes she owned: jeans, a nondescript grey hoodie, and a baseball cap pulled low over her face. She took a meandering route to the park, switching subway trains 3 times, paying with cash. She felt like a character in a spy novel, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Thea Gallo was already there. She was smaller than Olivia had imagined, with a shock of unruly salt and pepper hair, and eyes that were sharp and intelligent, missing nothing. She was leaning against a stone archway, pretending to read a book. But Olivia could see her gaze sweeping the area, cataloguing every person who walked by. Cassandra Thea asked, her voice a low, gravelly rasp, not even looking up from her book as Olivia approached. "Yes. You've got 5 minutes to convince me this isn't a waste of my time." Olivia's hands trembled as she pulled the thumb drive from her pocket. "It's all on here," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Everything. The shell corporations, the offshore accounts, the ledgers for Project Nightingale. He has Councilman Jennings in his pocket. It's all documented." Thea finally looked at her, her gaze sharp and appraising. She didn't take the drive. A lot of people make accusations against Richard Sterling. He's a rich, powerful man. It comes with the territory. Why should I believe you because I'm his wife? The words hung in the air between them. Thea's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. She studied Olivia's face, seeing past the hoodie and the fear to the desperate resolve beneath. Why Thea asked the single word encompassing a universe of questions. Why now? Why turn on him? What's in it for you? Olivia's hand went to her stomach, a gesture that was both protective and defiant. "He missed our baby's first ultrasound to be with his mistress in St. Bart's," she said, her voice cracking with a raw, undeniable pain. "He thinks I'm just a quiet, stupid accessory he can discard when he's bored. He's about to find out how wrong he is. It was the detail that sealed it. Not the financial data, but the human story. The betrayal." Thea Gallo knew that the best stories weren't about numbers. They were about hubris, and Richard Sterling's hubris was about to be his downfall. She held out her hand. "Give it to me." Olivia placed the drive in her palm. The transfer of power was immediate. The weight on her shoulders lifted, replaced by a terrifying, exhilarating sense of inevitability. She had lit the fuse. Now all she could do was wait for the explosion. "Go home," Thea said, her voice softening slightly. "Act normal. Say nothing. Don't contact me again. I'll find you if I need you. And Olivia." Olivia turned. "Be careful." The first article dropped 4 days later. It was the front-page story of the Chronicle above the fold. The headline was a masterpiece of journalistic aggression: Sterling's Shadow Empire, a trail of bribes, shell companies, and betrayed trust. The article didn't mention Olivia. It didn't mention Chloe Vanderbilt or the trip to St. Bart's. It was a cold, surgical dissection of Richard's business practices. Thea laid out the evidence with meticulous precision, detailing the creation of the Shell Corporation, the suspicious timing of the political donations to Councilman Jennings, and the subsequent favorable zoning decisions that had netted Sterling's company hundreds of millions of dollars. She didn't publish the documents themselves that would be her next move, but she described their contents in such detail that it was clear her source was impeccable. Olivia was in the kitchen making tea when Richard came storming in, his face purple with rage. He was holding a copy of the paper, his knuckles white as he gripped it. "Did you see this trash?" he roared, slamming the paper down on the marble island. That vindictive witch. She's been trying to come after me for years. Someone is feeding her lies. Lies. He was looking at her, his eyes boring into her, searching for any flicker of guilt, any sign of triumph. She met his gaze with a carefully constructed mask of wide-eyed concern. "My God, Richard," she said, her voice trembling slightly. That's horrible. Who would do such a thing?" He stared at her for a long moment, the silence stretching into an unbearable tension. She could see the gears turning in his mind, the paranoia warring with his ingrained belief in her meekness. He wanted to believe she was incapable of such a calculated betrayal. His ego demanded it. Finally, he seemed to make a decision. He let out a long, weary breath, the rage seeming to drain out of him, replaced by a practiced performance of a man under siege. "I don't know," he said, slumping into a chair. "But I'm going to find out. And when I do, I am going to destroy them." He looked up at her, his eyes pleading. "I need you by my side for this, Liv. We have to present a united front, you and me against the world, just like we always planned." He reached for her hand. His touch was like ice. "Of course, darling," she said, forcing a smile as she allowed him to pull her closer. "Whatever you need." As she stood there, his arm around her, the smell of his fury and fear filling the air, she felt a cold, terrifying certainty. This was just the beginning. The story was out. The storm had broken. And they were standing directly in its path. Thea Gallo's article was not a bomb. It was a contagion. It spread through the city's financial and political ecosystems with terrifying speed, infecting every aspect of Richard's life. The first 48 hours were a whirlwind of frantic phone calls, cancelled meetings, and the palpable chill of his powerful friends suddenly becoming unavailable. The sterling brand, once synonymous with luxury and success, was now tainted by the whiff of corruption. Richard, true to form, came out swinging. He convened a press conference in the lobby of Sterling Tower, a marble and glass cathedral to his own ego. Standing before a wall of cameras, with Olivia positioned slightly behind him, as the supportive stoic wife, he was a masterclass in controlled indignation. "These are baseless smears." He thundered, his voice resonating with rehearsed outrage. "The work of a journalist with a personal vendetta and a cowardly anonymous source who is feeding her lies. My business dealings are an open book. My success was earned through hard work and innovation, not by cutting corners or breaking laws. We will be pursuing every available legal option against the New York Chronicle for this malicious and defamatory attack." Olivia played her part, her expression a perfect blend of concern for her husband and dignified defiance. Inside, she was a roiling sea of anxiety and a grim, burgeoning satisfaction. She watched him lie to the world, to the battery of reporters, and felt not a shred of her former love, only a profound and chilling alienation. The man she had married had never really existed. He was a performance, and this was his grandest, most desperate one yet. But the performance wasn't working. Thea Gallo was too respected, her reporting too meticulous. The story had legs. The district attorney's office issued a terse no comment when asked if they were looking into the allegations, a phrase that in political parlance meant, yes, absolutely. Investors in his new development project began to get nervous. A Japanese consortium, which had been poised to inject $500 million into the deal, announced they were postponing their decision, pending further review. The stock price of Sterling Enterprises, his publicly traded parent company, dipped 5%, then 10%. The pressure began to fray Richard at the edges. The mask of the confident tycoon would slip, revealing the snarling, paranoid man beneath. The penthouse, once a quiet sanctuary, became a pressure cooker. He would pace for hours, phone fused to his ear, alternating between barking orders at his legal team and trying to soothe the nerves of his dwindling allies. His suspicion of Olivia was a constant, unspoken hum beneath the surface of their interactions. He had his security team sweep the apartment for bugs, a move he explained as standard procedure given the circumstances. He bought her a new phone, a present, he said, but she knew it was a tracking device, a way to monitor her every communication. She used it only for mundane conversations, continuing to communicate with Maya through a cheap burner phone she kept hidden in a box of tampons, the one place she knew he would never look. Then came the Chloe problem. The influencer, who had built a career on being aspirational and carefree, was not equipped for this kind of crisis. The comments on her Instagram feed had turned vicious. She was no longer just a home wrecker. She was now associated with a brewing criminal scandal. Her sponsors began to pull out. A lucrative contract with a high-end tequila brand was suddenly under review. Chloe panicked. She started calling Richard constantly, her voice a shrill, hysterical whine that Olivia could hear even from the next room. "You have to fix this, Richie," she'd shrieked during one call Olivia overheard. "My reputation is ruined. That journalist is going to start digging into me next. I just know it. Our contract says you're supposed to handle this stuff." Their business arrangement was crumbling under the pressure. Chloe, the carefully curated asset, had become a massive liability. After one particularly nasty, hour-long phone call, Richard smashed a Lalique vase against the wall, the sound of shattering crystal echoing the state of his life. He turned to Olivia, his eyes wild. "Do you see what they're doing to us?" "To our family," he demanded, as if she were a co-conspirator in his own defense. It was in that moment that Olivia decided to twist the knife. "Maybe you should just pay her more," she said, her voice deceptively gentle. She was arranging a bouquet of fresh lilies, her movements calm and deliberate. Richard froze. "What did you say?" Chloe Olivia said, not looking at him. "It's clearly a business arrangement. You have a contract after all. Maybe you just need to renegotiate her consulting fee to include hazard pay." The blood drained from his face. It was a direct hit. The one piece of information he couldn't fathom how she would know. He had been so careful with that folder, so certain of his digital security. The look in his eyes was no longer mere suspicion. It was a cold, terrifying certainty. "How do you know about that?" he whispered, his voice shaking with a rage that was far more potent than his earlier theatrics. Olivia finally looked up, meeting his gaze with a cool, level stare. "You're a terrible liar, Richard. And you're sloppy. You leave things open on your computer." The charade was over. The unspoken war was now declared. "You," he seethed, taking a step towards her. "This was you. You went to Gallo. Prove it," she said, her voice steady, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. He stalked towards her, his face a mask of fury, his hands clenched into fists. For a terrifying second, she thought he was going to hit her. She stood her ground, her chin held high, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach. His eyes followed the movement, and he stopped, his chest heaving. The baby, her silent, unknowing protector. "I am going to ruin you," he hissed, his voice a low, venomous promise. "When this is over, you will have nothing. No money, no friends. People will see you for the vindictive, gold-digging snake you are. I will make sure of it. You can't ruin me, Richard, she said, her voice ringing with a strength she didn't know she possessed. Because I was never one of your assets, and you are about to learn what happens when you write off a liability that knows all your secrets. He stared at her, breathing heavily, the hatred in his eyes a palpable force. The battle lines were drawn. It was no longer about money or infidelity. It was a primal struggle for survival. He would use all his power, all his wealth and influence to crush her. But she had the one thing he didn't: the truth. And she had given it to a woman who was about to publish her second installment. The fallout was just beginning. The week after their confrontation was a new kind of hell. The penthouse was no longer a home, but a battlefield thick with the silence of unspoken threats. Richard had his lawyers draft a public statement for Olivia to sign a declaration of her unwavering belief in his innocence. She refused. Her defiance sent him into a silent, simmering rage that was more unnerving than any of his shouted tirades. He had her followed. A sleek black town car would be parked across the street whenever she left the building. He was trying to intimidate her, to isolate her, to box her in. Meanwhile, Thea Gallo's second article hit the newsstands. This one was even more devastating than the first. The headline was stark: "The Sterling Ledgers. A how-to guide for bribing public officials." Thea, using the information from the thumb drive, published redacted snippets of the financial records from the Project Nightingale folder. She detailed the exact dates and amounts of the wire transfers from Sterling Enterprises to the Shell Company, and from the Shell Company to Councilman Jennings' campaign fund. It was a smoking gun, a clear and undeniable map of corruption. The story ignited a political firestorm. Councilman Jennings held a disastrous press conference where he sweated profusely and denied everything, looking guiltier with every word. The mayor, a longtime ally of Richard's, was forced to call for an independent investigation. The sharks were circling. Olivia watched it all unfold from her gilded prison, a strange mix of terror and triumph churning in her gut. She had set this in motion, but the story now had a life of its own, a powerful momentum she couldn't control. The breakthrough came from a place she hadn't expected. In a quiet suburb in New Jersey, a man named Frank Miller read Thea Gallo's latest article, his morning coffee growing cold in his hands. Frank was Sterling Enterprises' former chief financial officer. He was a quiet, meticulous accountant who had worked for Richard for 15 years. A year ago, Frank had discovered the Project Nightingale discrepancies. He had gone to Richard naively believing his boss would be horrified that it must be some kind of mistake. Richard had fired him on the spot. He'd had him sign an ironclad NDA in exchange for a meager severance package and threatened to ruin his reputation in the industry if he ever spoke a word. Frank, a man with a mortgage and 2 kids in college, had been terrified into silence. But seeing Thea's article, seeing the very secrets he had been forced to keep, laid bare for the world to see, sparked a flicker of courage in his long-dormant conscience. He knew he had something even more valuable than the ledgers Thea had published. He had the recordings. Richard, in his arrogance, had a habit of recording his meetings. He called it keeping an accurate record. Frank knew it was for blackmail purposes. For his own protection, Frank had made a copy of one specific recording before he was fired, the meeting where Richard and Councilman Jennings explicitly discussed the quid pro quo arrangement. The zoning variance in exchange for a series of offshore payments. It was the one piece of evidence that could send them both to prison. After a week of sleepless nights and hushed, fearful conversations with his wife, Frank Miller made a decision. He found Thea Gallo's contact information and sent her a one-line email. "I have the rest of your story." Thea, sensing the magnitude of the moment, arranged to meet him immediately. The recording was everything she had hoped for, and more. The audio quality was crystal clear. Richard's voice, smug and self-assured, laying out the terms of the bribe. Jennings's greedy, eager acceptance. It was the nail in the coffin. Richard, however, was not a man to go down without a fight. He was bleeding money, his allies were abandoning him in droves, and the DA was impaneling a grand jury. He was desperate, and his desperation made him reckless. Through his own network of private investigators, he found out that Thea had been in contact with a disgraced former CFO. He put two and two together, and realized Frank Miller was about to betray him. He decided to take matters into his own hands. He drove out to Frank's suburban home himself. No lawyers, no security. He thought he could intimidate his former employee back into silence the way he always had. He offered Frank money, a lot of it, to disappear, to deny everything. When Frank refused his newfound courage holding firm, Richard's temper snapped. The argument spilled out onto the front lawn. "You are nothing!" Richard screamed, his face contorted with rage, completely oblivious to the neighbor across the street who was filming the entire exchange on her phone. "I made you, and I will destroy you. I will ruin your family." The threat, crude and desperate, was a critical error. The neighbor, who had already been following the Sterling scandal in the news, immediately sent the video to the local TV station. By that evening, the footage was everywhere. Richard Sterling, the sophisticated billionaire, was exposed as a common thug, threatening a scared, middle-aged man on his own front lawn. It shattered the last remnants of his public image. It was ugly, it was raw, and it was undeniable. Back in the penthouse, Olivia watched the news report, her hand covering her mouth in shock. This was beyond anything she could have orchestrated. Richard's own hubris, his own uncontrollable rage, was proving to be his most effective enemy. The phone rang. It was Maya. "It's over, Liv," she said, her voice awestruck. He just handed the prosecution a witness tampering charge on a silver platter. "He's done." Later that night, the doorbell rang. It wasn't Richard. It was two detectives from the NYPD. They were polite, professional, and deeply uncomfortable. "Mrs. Sterling," one of them began, "we have a warrant for your husband's arrest. We have reason to believe he may be here." Olivia stood in the doorway of the life that was now collapsing around her. She had a choice. She could have told them he wasn't there, bought him a few more hours of freedom. But she thought of the ultrasound, of the cold clinical room, of the lie about Dubai, of the casual cruelty in his eyes when he realized she knew. She looked past the detectives down the long marble hallway towards the master bedroom, where she knew he was hiding, making frantic phone calls to lawyers who were no longer answering. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and steady. "He's here. Please come in." The arrest was a quiet, humiliating affair. There was no dramatic chase, just the surreal sight of Richard Sterling, his face slack with shock, being led out of his own penthouse in handcuffs. The click of the cuffs was the punctuation mark at the end of their marriage. In the days that followed, Richard's empire imploded. The recording from Frank Miller and the witness tampering video created an open and shut case. His allies vanished, and his company fell apart. Thea Gallo's final article was less an exposé and more a eulogy for a fallen titan, noting that Richard's greatest liability was his inability to see the value in the people he considered his assets. Guided by Maya Olivia, filed for divorce. The infidelity clause, bolstered by the St. Bart's photo and Chloe Vanderbilt's tell-all interview, made the proceedings swift. Richard, facing decades in prison, signed the papers from a holding cell. Olivia took what the prenup stipulated, a fortune she didn't want for herself. She sold the penthouse, erasing every trace of him to scrub clean the gilded cage. 6 months later, Olivia was living in a sun-drenched Brooklyn brownstone. The proceeds from the sale were in a trust for her daughter Lily, and funded a new foundation. She started to provide legal aid to women in abusive relationships. She returned to work at the library, not for the money, but for the peace it brought her. One afternoon, while rocking her 1-month-old daughter, a news alert popped up on her phone. It was the headline she had been waiting for. Sterling sentenced to 20 years. Judge cites staggering arrogance. She read that his downfall was traced back to a single ill-advised beach selfie. Looking at Lily sleeping in her arms, Olivia whispered, "He thought he was the star of the show, but he was just the villain in our story. And we get to write the happy ending." The story of Richard Sterling was over. Hers was just beginning. She was no longer a wife or a victim, but a mother, a philanthropist, and a survivor who had turned his ugliest secrets into a force for good. He wanted a headline, and she had given him exactly what he deserved. And there you have it, a story of betrayal, resilience, and ultimate triumph. Olivia's journey shows us that sometimes the greatest strength is found in our most painful moments. It's a reminder that no one is untouchable, and that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of coming to light. Sometimes the most unexpected betrayals are the ones that shatter our entire reality. Picture a loving mother, a devoted wife, stepping into the grand lobby of the Hyatt Regency in downtown Chicago, her pulse quickening at the thought of surprising her husband on his routine business trip. Yet instead of his welcoming embrace, she is greeted by a sight that rips her world apart. A tender kiss shared between him and a mysterious woman in a sleek black coat. In that single heart-stopping moment, everything changes. Secrets spill into the open heart's break, and as a new chapter begins, it unfolds into a storm of regret, revenge, and the ultimate fight for hope. Emma Davenport woke to the sound of her alarm clock vibrating stubbornly on the bedside table, its gentle buzzing a relentless reminder of the hectic day ahead. She blinked herself awake momentarily, disoriented by the early dawn light cutting through the thin curtains. For a moment, she simply lay there, taking in the comforting smell of fresh linen and the faint lemony tang of the cleaning spray she always used. Next to her, the bed was cold and empty. Mark had left for Chicago the previous afternoon, attending yet another financial conference as part of his ever-demanding job at Harper & Green Investments. Their 3-year-old daughter Lily stirred in the next room. Emma could hear the soft hum of a lullaby playing from the child's nightlight, a small giraffe that projected stars onto the ceiling. She swung her legs off the bed and headed to Lily's room, her mind already flipping through the day's tasks. She planned to surprise Mark in Chicago that evening. Over the last few months, an uneasy feeling had gnawed at her, a suspicion she kept pushing aside. While Mark claimed to be overwhelmed with work, she wanted to see for herself if everything was really as he said. She scooped Lily into her arms, inhaling the sweet baby shampoo in her daughter's hair. A wave of resolve swept over her. For years, she had trusted Mark blindly. He was the calm, steady presence in her life, a man who made time for bedtime stories and neighborhood barbecues even as he rose through the ranks of his firm. Yet something had changed. It was in the way he avoided her eyes at the dinner table, in the vague excuses he made after late-night phone calls. Emma needed clarity, and she was determined to get it. Despite her growing worries, Emma couldn't forget the man who once charmed her with fresh daisies on their first date. In the early days, Mark was her everything. They had met by chance at an art gallery in downtown Seattle, introduced by mutual acquaintances. Emma had been immediately drawn to his warm laugh and quiet confidence. They shared a passion for exploring museums, volunteering at local charities, and dreaming of a future filled with travel love and children. But as Mark climbed higher in his career, work trips became the norm. It started slowly, a day trip to Los Angeles, a 2-night conference in Boston. Emma had brushed off any concerns back then, reminding herself that she had married a man with ambition. His success was their success. But with each promotion, Mark's job demands soared. His phone was forever buzzing with new messages. His eyes flickered with tension whenever she asked questions. A month ago, Emma found a receipt in Mark's coat pocket from the St. Regis Hotel in Chicago. It was for a lavish dinner for 2. Mark had told her it was merely a networking meal with a prospective client named Mr. Townsend. Yet the scrawled signature on the receipt wasn't Mark's handwriting. Alarm bells rang in Emma's mind, but she was too afraid to push him, afraid of what she might learn. In the back of her mind, she clung to a fragile hope that there was an innocent explanation. That morning, as she kissed Lily goodbye and entrusted her to the care of her mother, Linda Pierce, Emma's nerves twisted in her stomach. She told herself she was just going to surprise Mark, to remind him that his family was right here, waiting and loving him. She prayed that her doubts were unfounded, and that by nightfall they would be laughing about her silly suspicions. She had no idea that what she would witness in a few short hours would change everything. The drive from their suburban home in Lake Forest to Chicago was typically just over an hour, but traffic stretched it to nearly 2. Emma found herself tapping her fingers anxiously on the steering wheel, eyes flicking to the clock every few minutes. She had planned her arrival to coincide with Mark's break between conference sessions. The plan was simple: appear in the hotel lobby around 7 in the evening. Text him to meet her by the grand staircase and greet him with a heartfelt kiss. She hoped the spontaneity would reignite the spark that had dwindled over the past year. As she navigated the bustling city streets, Emma remembered how much she used to love Chicago. She had attended college here years ago and always found an unmatched energy in its towering skyline. Now the once exciting metropolis felt daunting, its tall buildings pressing in on her. She turned onto Michigan Avenue, weaving through throngs of pedestrians. With every mile, her heart pounded faster. She parked in an underground garage and made her way to the Hyatt Regency, an enormous structure that soared above the city. Emma swiped a bit of lipstick across her lips, checked her reflection in the mirrored panels near the revolving doors, and took a calming breath. She tried not to let her anxious thoughts overshadow her intentions. If she was going to face Mark, it had to be with confidence. Clutching her purse, she stepped into the grand lobby with its marble floors and lofty ceilings. She could almost imagine Mark's surprised grin, the way he'd lift her up in a twirl. But as she scanned the opulent space, she didn't see him at the lounge or by the registration desk. Instead, she saw something else, something that made her freeze in her tracks. There near the bar area, under soft golden lights, sat Mark. He wasn't alone. A woman with dark, cascading hair leaned close, her hand resting intimately on his arm. Emma's brain struggled to process what she was seeing. For a second, she prayed it was some misunderstanding. Perhaps this was a colleague, and they were discussing business details. But then Mark turned to the woman, and their lips met in a slow, unmistakably romantic kiss. Emma felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Numbness washed over her entire body. Her feet rooted to the spot, and it was as if the rest of the world faded away, leaving only the horrifying sight of her husband kissing a stranger. It was surreal, like a bad dream from which she couldn't wake. She stood there not more than 20 feet away, unnoticed by Mark. The woman, elegantly dressed in a fitted black coat, pulled back and gazed adoringly at him. Emma recognized that look. It was the look of someone deeply involved. She realized with acute clarity that this wasn't just a casual fling. This was something that had been going on long enough for them to appear entirely at ease in public. Tears pricked the back of her eyes, but fury overcame her shock. How dare he do this here so blatantly? She wanted to stride across the lobby. Slap him. Make a scene. 1,000 impulses warred in her mind. Heartbreak, anger, confusion, and the fragile remains of her dignity. Ultimately, she took a shaking breath and backed away, retreating into the shadows of the expansive corridor, leaving Mark and his mistress, who for now remained oblivious to Emma's presence. Emma didn't remember how she got from the hotel to the street. One moment, she was inside that marble lobby, watching Mark betray her. The next, she was stumbling onto the sidewalk, swallowing lungfuls of the frigid Chicago air. Her phone buzzed in her purse, but she couldn't bring herself to look at it. If it was Mark, she didn't want to talk to him. If it was anyone else, she couldn't summon the strength to explain what she'd just witnessed. For what felt like hours, she wandered aimlessly along the streets, tears streaming down her cheeks. She replayed the scene in her head over and over, each iteration stabbing deeper than the last. Glimpses of their life together flashed before her eyes. Mark's smile on their wedding day, the time he wept with joy when Lily was born, the nights he would scoop her into his arms and promise her the world. How could that same man now be kissing another woman without remorse? Eventually, she found herself standing near a small park, the lights from a nearby cafe illuminating the tears on her face. She sank onto a bench and let her emotions course through her. Anger flared white-hot, mingling with heartbreak. She wanted answers, yet the thought of confronting Mark right now was too much to bear. Her phone buzzed again. Summoning her nerve, she pulled it out to see a text from her mother Linda, who asked, "How's the surprise going? Is Mark excited?" Lily's asking for her daddy. Emma's gut twisted as she read the words. How could she ever explain this to Lily? She typed a quick, shaky reply. "Not great. I'll be home soon." Then she hailed a taxi back to her car, her mind already plotting her next move. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She paced the living room, waiting for Mark to return from Chicago. She had no intention of revealing she had gone there to see him. Let him try to lie his way out. First, she wanted to see how deep his betrayal would go. Around midnight, Mark finally strode into the house with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, and the faint smell of hotel soap clinging to his skin. "Hey, honey," he greeted, sounding casual, almost loving, as though nothing was amiss. "Conference ran late. You didn't have to wait up." Emma forced a tight smile. "I wanted to see you," she replied coolly. In truth, she was marveling at his ability to pretend. Her heart hammered against her ribcage, and she felt the urge to scream at him to demand he tell her the truth. But she waited, letting the tension build between them. Mark went to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, and offered Emma one as well. As he turned around, she fixed him with a steady gaze. "Did you have dinner with Mr. Townsend again?" she asked, voice trembling lightly. He hesitated, eyes flicking away for the briefest moment before returning to hers. Yeah, he lied smoothly. It was all business just like before. Emma's anger flared at the blatant untruth. She clenched her fists at her sides, her nails digging into her palms. She could feel her composure crumbling. Suddenly she snapped. "Stop lying to me, Mark. I saw you." His glass of water slipped from his fingers, shattering on the tile floor. For a moment, neither of them moved. The confession hung in the air heavier than the tension that preceded it. "Saw me," he whispered, face draining of color. Emma gulped a shaky breath, eyes brimming with tears. "I was at the Hyatt tonight. I saw you with her." She spat the final word with venom, each syllable echoing with betrayal. Mark's mind whirred as he scrambled to regain control of the situation. Emma watched his expressions shift from shock to denial, then to something like desperation. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then finally managed. "It's not what you think." Emma laughed a harsh, broken sound. "Oh, really? Because it looked like you and that woman were pretty cozy," she said, crossing her arms over her chest. "Is she your mistress?" Mark raked a hand through his hair. She's Veronica Graham," he admitted, voice low. "She's a colleague from the firm. We've been seeing each other." Emma's stomach lurched, and she turned away, unable to look at him. Of all the words she expected to hear, his direct admission of guilt was both validating and soul-crushing. Why, she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and hurt. "Why would you do this to us?" He took a faltering step forward, only to stop when he saw her recoil. "It just happened." Mark tried, his voice shaking. "I've been under a lot of stress. Veronica understands my work. She's there late at night, pulling the same hours, dealing with the same pressures." "Don't!" Emma hissed, tears streaking her face. "Don't you dare reduce this to stress and late nights. We have a child, Mark. We had a life." He wiped a hand across his face. "I never stopped loving you," he insisted. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake." "That's a convenient word," she spat, "and one that doesn't mean much now. You think you can just come back, say it was a mistake, and everything is fine." She turned away again, her voice dropping to a pained whisper. "I trusted you." Mark tried to speak, but she cut him off with a trembling hand. "It's too late for apologies. You made your choice." With that, she fled to their bedroom, leaving him alone in the kitchen, shards of broken glass and cold water pooling around his feet, a fitting metaphor for the ruin of their marriage. Emma had always believed she could handle anything if she and Mark faced it together. But that night, as she curled into a tight ball on their bed, she realized she was on her own. The magnitude of his betrayal crushed her. The man she thought she knew inside and out had been leading a double life. How could she ever trust him again? Throughout the night, Emma wrestled with her thoughts. She heard Mark downstairs making phone calls, likely to Veronica. She wondered if he was telling her that Emma knew. The idea of them discussing her pain so casually left her furious and humiliated. She knew she couldn't stay in that house, playing the role of dutiful wife while Mark sorted out his affair. When Lily's soft cries broke the silence at dawn, Emma rose mechanically. She realized with sudden clarity what she had to do. She needed to leave. Emma's first priority was her daughter, protecting her from the fallout of this nightmare. As Lily's innocent eyes opened, Emma forced a reassuring smile onto her face, but inside her heart was in shreds. Once Lily was fed and dressed, Emma scribbled a short note for Mark. "I'm taking Lily away for a while. Don't follow us. We need space." She set the note on the kitchen counter, next to the shards of broken glass that still lay there from the night before Mark hadn't even bothered to clean them up. It was symbolic, she realized, of how little he cared for order, now that his secret was out. Emma packed a suitcase, taking only essentials. She called her mother, but Linda didn't pick up. She didn't leave a voicemail. She wanted to make her move before Mark woke up. Give herself a head start. Within half an hour, Emma had Lily strapped into the back seat of the car and was pulling away from the life she had known. She drove eastward, not entirely sure where she was going. Emma had distant relatives in Michigan, an aunt named Eleanor, who'd moved to a lakeside property near Traverse City. It was a place Emma had visited a few times in childhood. Aunt Eleanor and Emma's mother had never been close, but Emma remembered her aunt as a kind, if somewhat reserved woman. With no other plan in mind, Emma dialed the number she found in an old address book tucked away in the glove compartment. To her relief, Eleanor picked up on the second ring, after a hasty explanation that left out most details. Emma asked if she and Lily could stay for a while. "We just need to get away," she confessed in a trembling voice. Despite years of little contact, Eleanor hesitated only for a moment before agreeing. The promise of a temporary haven calmed Emma's racing heart. She pressed down on the accelerator, determined to put as much distance as possible between them and Mark. Lily dozed in the back seat, hugging her little stuffed elephant. Every now and then Emma glanced in the rearview mirror, tears stinging her eyes. She felt guilty uprooting Lily's life, but she believed she was protecting her daughter from the emotional storm. For now, at least they would be safe in a remote lakeside cottage, away from the chaos Mark's actions had unleashed. As the cityscape gave way to open highway, and then rolling farmland, Emma's thoughts drifted to what would happen next. She had no clear plan. The heartbreak was too fresh to think about lawyers or custody battles. But one thing was sure: she would not let Mark's betrayal define her or harm Lily. If he wanted to keep playing the role of an unfaithful husband, he would do it alone. Mark awoke in an empty house. The silence, usually comforting after a long trip, felt suffocating. He rubbed his eyes and glanced at his phone. No new messages from Emma. Confusion prickled at his mind. Normally, Lily would be chattering in the living room, or Emma would have breakfast ready. He rolled out of bed, the events of the previous night seeping back into his consciousness like a poison. He found Emma's note on the kitchen counter. His stomach lurched as he read it. "I'm taking Lily away for a while. Don't follow us. We need space." Shock turned to panic. She was gone, and she had taken Lily. Mark ran a hand through his hair, guilt and fear swirling together. He reached for his phone, dialing Emma's number, but it went straight to voicemail. He tried Linda's number, hoping her mother would have some information, but Linda sounded just as alarmed when Mark mentioned Emma's disappearance. "What do you mean she's gone?" Linda demanded. "She left Lily with me yesterday morning. Now you're saying she took Lily away." When Mark's stunned silence answered her question well enough, and Linda hung up in anger, promising to find her daughter, Mark paced the house like a trapped animal, scanning for any sign of where Emma might have gone. He scoured her desk drawers, the bedroom closet, even the attic. There was no clue. All he found were the heartbreakingly empty spaces where Emma's clothes had been. The realization that she had planned this departure, packed Lily's things, wrote the note, and left without looking back, crushed him. He knew he had done this. He was the one who'd introduced deceit into their marriage, and now, facing the consequences, the depth of his regret began to sink in. But regret wouldn't bring Emma back. If he wanted to salvage anything, he would have to take drastic steps to win back his family's trust, assuming Emma would even give him the chance. Days stretched into a week, and still Emma did not return. Mark reached out to everyone he could think of, mutual friends, acquaintances, even distant relatives, but no one knew where Emma and Lily might be. In a moment of desperation, Mark confided in his best friend and co-worker, James Overton. James's advice was blunt. "You need a lawyer." Reluctantly, Mark scheduled an appointment with Rebecca Slater, a top family law attorney in Chicago. Sitting in her sleek office with floor-to-ceiling windows, Mark felt exposed and vulnerable. Rebecca studied him from behind her large mahogany desk, her expression unreadable. "So your wife left," she stated, scanning over the initial paperwork he had filled out, "and she took your child with her. Have you received any official communication regarding a divorce or custody arrangement?" Mark shook his head. "No. She left a note. That's it." "I've tried calling, texting, no response." Rebecca folded her hands. "Did you give her cause?" Mark's face burned. He cleared his throat. I had an affair." She found out. Rebecca nodded her gaze, never wavering. Infidelity can certainly precipitate drastic actions. "Look, we can file a petition for a formal custody arrangement, but if she hasn't filed for divorce yet, it's a bit tricky." "Are you sure you want to go down that path immediately? Sometimes it escalates things beyond repair." Mark hesitated, tears pricking the corners of his eyes. All he truly wanted was to fix things with Emma, to apologize, to beg her forgiveness. But Emma was gone, and he had no idea how to reach her. "I just want to see my daughter," he whispered. "I'll do whatever it takes." Rebecca's face softened slightly. "Let's hold off on immediate legal action. I'll do some private searching, see if we can find out where she might be staying. Once we know that, you can decide how to proceed. In the meantime, gather financial statements, property details, everything." Mark left her office feeling more lost than ever. He had set a ruinous ball in motion by kissing Veronica that night in the hotel lobby, by allowing their affair to blossom in the first place. Now, with Emma and Lily vanished, he realized the gaping void where his family used to be. For the first time, the possibility of never seeing them again crushed him beyond measure. Emma found a quiet solace in Aunt Eleanor's lakeside home. The weather was beginning to warm, melting the last patches of snow around the cabin's perimeter. Lily, oblivious to the drama unfolding, loved splashing at the shoreline with her tiny boots. She giggled when the cold water touched her toes and made a game of collecting shiny pebbles. Aunt Eleanor was an enigma. She did not pry for details about Emma's sudden arrival. Instead, she offered the comforts of home warm meals, a cozy bedroom, and an ample supply of patient understanding. Emma was grateful for the sanctuary. When she couldn't sleep at night, she'd wander down to the dock, staring out at the moonlit lake. The stillness of the water mirrored her new sense of limbo, not quite sure where she was headed, but certain she couldn't go back to the life she left. One evening, Aunt Eleanor joined Emma on the dock, handing her a steaming mug of tea. They stood in silence for a while, the night breeze rippling across the lake's surface. Finally, Eleanor spoke in her measured, quiet voice. "I don't need to know everything that happened, dear, but I can see the pain in your eyes." Emma nodded, tears brimming. "He cheated," she said, simply. "I saw him, there's no doubt." Aunt Eleanor inhaled slowly. "I'm so sorry," she replied, setting a gentle hand on Emma's shoulder. "I'd never presume to tell you what to do, but know that if you need time, or if you need someone to lean on, I'm here." Emma exhaled shakily. "I just can't believe he'd throw away our family like that." "Now I'm afraid Afraid of the future. Afraid he'll try to take Lily, or that I'll never be able to stand on my own 2 feet again. Eleanor's gaze was firm, yet kind. Emma, you're stronger than you think. Start with today. Focus on what you need right now to keep yourself and Lily safe and stable. Over the following weeks, Emma took on small tasks to help Eleanor around the property. She found a moment of peace in the rhythm of raking leaves and planting new flowers. Lily thrived on the freedom chasing after butterflies and squealing with delight whenever a duck paddled near the shore. The constant ache of betrayal was still there, but day by day, Emma felt a small kernel of strength grow within her. While Emma and Lily found an uneasy peace in Michigan, Mark's mistress Veronica, Graham, was facing her own challenges. In the aftermath of Emma's disappearance, Mark had distanced himself from Veronica, plagued by guilt and worry. Their once passionate affair, fueled by late-night strategy sessions and stolen kisses in the office corridor, had begun to sour under the weight of real-life consequences. Veronica was no stranger to ambition. She thrived in the fast-paced environment of Harper & Green Investments. But rumors circulated quickly in corporate hallways. Whispers of the married Mark Davenport's affair reached many ears, and it didn't take long for people to link it to Veronica. The sly looks and hushed judgments weighed on her every time she walked into the office. She confronted Mark about his sudden coldness one evening, when he agreed to meet her at a discreet cafe near their workplace. "I feel like you're punishing me for something." "We both chose," Veronica said, frustration evident in her voice. Mark rubbed his forehead. He looked tired, older somehow. "I'm not punishing you," he insisted. I'm worried about Emma and Lily." "She's gone, Veronica. I have no clue where she is. And it's my fault." Veronica reached out to take his hand, but Mark pulled away. The rejection stung. "You can't blame yourself entirely," she tried. "We both knew what we were doing. Emma finding out, well, that was never going to be clean or easy." Mark stared into his coffee cup. "That doesn't help," he said, voice hollow. "I need to make this right, but I don't even know how. Everything is a mess." Realizing the rift that had formed, Veronica felt resentment rise within her. She had risked her reputation and emotional well-being for a man who now seemed bent on retreating into his guilt. Still, she clung to the hope that she and Mark could weather the storm. After all, their bond went beyond mere lust, or so she believed. Frustrated by Rebecca Slater's slow progress and desperate for answers, Mark hired a private investigator named Jason Rudd. Jason came highly recommended by James Overton, who had once used him for a sensitive corporate matter. Though Mark felt uneasy about spying on his own wife, he rationalized that he had no other choice if he wanted to see Lily again. Jason was a middle-aged man with a calm demeanor and penetrating eyes. He listened intently as Mark recounted the night Emma left the note and the total lack of communication since. "She's not using her credit cards or her phone. At least I can't trace anything," Mark explained anxiously. Jason nodded. "She's being cautious. Likely she's using cash or a secondary bank account you're not aware of." He tapped a pen against his notepad. "Any family she might rely on. Friends outside your circle." Mark thought about Emma's mother, but Linda didn't seem to know anything. Then he remembered Emma's father had passed away years ago. She has an aunt, I think, on her mother's side. Eleanor something. They weren't very close. Jason jotted down the name. Eleanor. "That's a start." He handed Mark a stack of forms. "Sign these. I'll check phone records, any property ownership under that name. It might take a while, but we'll find them." As Mark complied, his heart pounded with conflicting emotions. Hiring a PI felt like a violation of Emma's privacy, but the alternative, doing nothing, left him paralyzed. The memory of her tear-streaked face the night she confronted him sliced through his guilt. He told himself he was doing this for Lily's sake, to be a father again, to fix what he'd broken. A small part of him feared what he'd say if he actually found Emma. Could they repair the marriage? Would she ever forgive him? Each question led to more uncertainty. Yet, Mark pushed forward, fueled by desperation. Weeks passed in Michigan. Emma's life fell into a quiet, routine breakfast with Aunt Eleanor. And Lily walks by the lake, occasional trips to the small town for groceries. She had saved enough money to sustain them for a while, and Aunt Eleanor refused any rent payments, insisting Emma's presence was enough. Still, Emma knew she couldn't hide forever. She spent her nights reading about divorce laws, spousal support, and child custody. The words swam before her tired eyes, overwhelming her with legal jargon. She jotted questions in a notebook, hoping to someday get real legal advice. One afternoon, Emma received a phone call on the new prepaid cell phone she had purchased under a false name. To her surprise, it was Linda Pierce, her mother. Emma froze, torn between her desire to talk to the woman who raised her and her fear that Mark might be tracking their communication. "Mum," Emma whispered, stepping out onto the cabin's porch. "Oh, thank God," Linda exclaimed, relief evident in her voice. "Emma, are you all right? Mark told me you left, but he doesn't know where you are." Emma hesitated, tears springing to her eyes. She missed her mother desperately, but she also feared that Linda might share her location with Mark. "We're safe," she managed. "I can't tell you where, though." "Not yet." Linda sniffled. "I won't force you, but please know I'm worried." "Lily is okay." "She's fine, Mum. She's healthy and happy." Emma looked toward the lake where Lily was chasing after a butterfly. He betrayed me, Mum. I can't go back. Not now." "I understand," Linda replied. "I don't know what to think of Mark anymore. He seems genuinely torn up. But this is your decision, dear. Just promise me you'll stay in touch. I won't tell him anything you don't want me to." Emma allowed herself a tiny measure of comfort. "Thank you, Mum. I'll call again soon." As the call ended, Emma felt a strange combination of relief and guilt. She had reconnected with her mother, but she still felt guilty for cutting off Mark entirely. Yet every time she pictured him with that other woman, the heartbreak flared anew. She reminded herself she was protecting Lily, and she had no obligation to rush back into Mark's arms. Back in Chicago, Jason Rudd's investigation bore fruit. He discovered that a certain Eleanor Pierce owned a modest lakeside property near Traverse City, Michigan. Public records indicated a recent utility spike, suggesting new occupants. Jason presented his findings to Mark in a manila envelope one morning at a discreet coffee shop. "This is likely where your wife is staying," Jason said matter-of-factly. "Based on what I've gathered, she's been there for at least a few weeks." Mark's hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. A property deed with Eleanor Pierce's name, some bank transactions for groceries, a few photographs of Emma's car, parked discreetly off the main road. Guilt and hope twisted together in his chest. She was within driving distance, alive and well with Lily. "What do I do now?" Mark asked quietly. Jason shrugged. "That's your call. Legally, you can attempt to force her to return, or at least negotiate custody. But if you truly want to reconcile, showing up with a court order might not be the best approach." Mark swallowed hard, thinking of Emma's tearful face. "I just want to see my daughter," he repeated. I want Emma to know how sorry I am." Jason gave him a curt nod. "Then go. But I'd advise you do it gently." Fueled by this revelation, Mark set out that same afternoon. The drive seemed endless, his thoughts a maelstrom. Would Emma slam the door in his face? Would she let Lily see him? Did he even deserve forgiveness? Each mile brought him closer to answers he might not be ready to hear. Late evening shadows stretched across the gravel road as Mark pulled up to the address Jason had provided. The cottage stood near the water's edge, lights glowing softly inside. Mark parked a short distance away, heart pounding in his ears. He approached the front porch, his mouth dry as sand. His footsteps sounded unnaturally loud on the wooden steps. Before he could knock, the door swung open, revealing Aunt Eleanor. She regarded him calmly, her lips a thin line of disapproval. "Mark," she said, voice cool. "I knew you'd come eventually." He nodded, swallowing hard. "May I see Emma?" Eleanor stepped aside, but didn't invite him in. "I'll get her. Wait here." Moments later, Emma appeared in the doorway. Her face paled at the sight of him, and she instinctively turned to check on Lily, who was napping in another room. Closing the door behind her, she joined him on the porch, crossing her arms protectively over her chest. "How did you find us?" she demanded, voice trembling with anger. Mark clenched and unclenched his fists. "I had to. I hired a PI." "Emma, I'm sorry." "Sorry," she repeated bitterly. "You come here with a private investigator's evidence spying on me and say you're sorry." He blinked back tears. "I couldn't just do nothing." "Emma, please. I had to see Lily. I'm not here to take her away. I want to see my daughter. And I want to talk. Can we please talk?" Emma stared at him, her emotions warring across her face. She glanced back at the cottage where Aunt Eleanor hovered in the doorway. Finally, she exhaled. "Fine. But Lily is asleep, and I don't want you waking her. We'll talk on the dock." Mark nodded, following her across the small yard to the lakeside dock. The moonlight reflected off the water, casting an ethereal glow over the surface. They stopped at the edge, the gentle sound of lapping waves filling the tension between them. They stood in silence for a moment, before Mark spoke, his voice cracking. "I've been going crazy not knowing where you were, if you were safe." Emma's jaw tightened. "I'm safe enough," she replied, her gaze fixed on the dark water. "And Lily is fine too. No thanks to you." Mark swallowed the lump in his throat. "I deserve that. Emma, I don't know if it helps, but I ended things with Veronica. I told her it's over. I'm willing to quit my job if that's what it takes to show you I'm serious about our marriage." Emma turned to look at him, tears glistening in her eyes. "Our marriage?" she echoed. "You broke our marriage the moment you slept with her. Do you have any idea how humiliating it was for me to see you two together in that lobby?" His own eyes grew misty. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I was an idiot. I got caught up in the pressures of work, the excitement there's no excuse. I just want a chance to make it right." Emma laughed bitterly, tears spilling over. "Make it right? How, Mark? You expect me to pretend this never happened, to forget the image of you kissing her?" Her voice shook with anger. "You lied to me. You lied about business trips, about dinners with Mr. Townsend. You chose her over us. I never chose her over you." Mark insisted, his words tumbling out. "I was confused." Emma raised a trembling hand, stopping him. "That's the thing, Mark. You did choose her every time you went to her hotel room or stayed late at the office for those so-called meetings. Now it's too late to say it was a mistake. The damage is done. Mark's breath hitched. Do you hate? Emma's tears fell in earnest. I hate what you've done. I hate that I have to look at Lily and know you betrayed us. She shook her head. But I'm also hurt, and part of me still loves you. I hate that the most. A choking sob escaped Mark's lips. He reached out to her, but she stepped back. They stood there raw and wounded under the moonlight, an unbridgeable chasm between them. Their conversation stretched into the late hours. Emma refused to let Mark inside the cottage, but she eventually relented to his request to see Lily in the morning. They sat under the starlight, discussing logistics, how Mark might visit without driving Emma away for good, how to handle finances in the interim. When Emma finally slipped back into the cottage, Mark slept fitfully in his car. His mind reeled from the confrontation, from Emma's tearful rage, from the faint glimmer of hope that she had not declared outright that their marriage was over. At dawn, Lily's voice roused Emma from sleep. The child was excited to see the ducks on the lake, babbling in her toddler speak. Emma's heart clenched, knowing Mark was waiting just outside. She made a quick decision and led Lily to the porch. There Mark stood with dark circles under his eyes and a weary smile. "Hi, sweetheart," he said softly, crouching down to Lily's eye level. The child looked unsure, hugging Emma's leg. For a moment, heartbreak flickered across Mark's face. He reached out gently, and Lily hesitated before stepping forward. "Daddy missed you," he whispered, pulling her into a delicate hug. Emma watched tears brimming again. She reminded herself that Lily deserved a father, even if he was flawed. That tiny moment of reunion was enough to tear at Emma's carefully constructed wall. Part of her wanted to lash out and push him away. Another part wanted to bury her face in his chest to recall the warmth of the man she had loved. They spent a tense half-hour together, Mark helping Lily feed the ducks. Emma standing off to the side, arms folded protectively. When Lily asked if Daddy was coming home, Emma felt the sting of tears once again. She shook her head silently, unable to speak. Mark glanced at her, his eyes filled with regret. "Let's take this one step at a time," he murmured, more to Emma than to Lily. She gave him a curt nod, swallowing the pain, and hoping for Lily's sake that they could find a way to coexist, whatever that might look like. Over the following days, Mark rented a small cabin in the same area, a few miles down the lake. Emma allowed him carefully supervised visits with Lily, ensuring the child didn't suffer the sting of confusion or broken promises. It was an uneasy truce. Emma refused to discuss a permanent reconciliation. Her wounds were still too fresh. But she also didn't push for an immediate divorce, torn between her lingering love for Mark and her deep-seated anger. Aunt Eleanor silently observed the delicate dance between them, offering Emma private words of support, but never overstepping. She saw the torment in Emma's eyes and recognized the complexity of heartbreak, betrayal, and love colliding. Occasionally, Emma and Mark found themselves talking about mundane things, Lily's bedtime routines, her favorite songs, or what she ate for lunch. These trivial exchanges felt odd, yet somehow comforting. They were a reminder of the normalcy they once shared. Meanwhile, Mark's guilt weighed heavily. He kept his distance, respecting Emma's boundary. Each time he saw Lily's face light up at his arrival, he felt a dual pang of joy and despair. Would he ever be fully forgiven? Or was he doomed to this half-life, desperately clinging to fatherhood, while Emma rebuilt her own world without him? A month into this arrangement, Veronica made an unannounced appearance. She had tracked Mark's sudden absence from work, discovered his leads about Emma's location, and decided to confront him. Her arrival sent shockwaves through the fragile peace Emma and Mark had established. Veronica showed up at Mark's rented cabin, her eyes blazing with anger and betrayal. "You haven't returned my calls or texts," she spat. "I had to find you on my own. So this is where you ran off to playing house with your wife again?" Mark stiffened. "It's not like that," he tried to explain. "Veronica, I told you it's over. Emma and Lily are my family. I'm trying to fix things." Veronica let out a scornful laugh. "Fix things? You think you can just walk away from me, from everything we shared?" She gestured around. "Did you expect me to just vanish so you could rebuild your perfect suburban life?" Mark felt a surge of irritation mixed with shame. "We made a mistake," he said through gritted teeth. "I'm owning up to it now. There's nothing more to say." Unfortunately, Emma had arrived at that exact moment, intending to drop Lily off for a short visit. She froze at the sight of Veronica, her heart pounding with renewed fury. The scene was all too much, a vicious reminder of the betrayal that had driven her here in the first place. Veronica turned at the sound of Emma's footsteps, her stare turning icy. "So this is the woman you ran away to," she said, her tone dripping with contempt. "Isn't it ironic? Emma, you ran, he chased you, and now the mistress is left behind." Before Emma could respond, Mark stepped forward. "Veronica, that's enough. This is between me and Emma." But Emma couldn't hold back her outrage. She marched up to Veronica, voice trembling. "Don't you dare twist this. You tore our marriage apart, and now you have the nerve to come here." Veronica's eyes flashed. "Your marriage was already in trouble, sweetheart. That's why Mark was with me in the first place." Emma's hand flew before she could stop herself, slapping Veronica hard across the face. Veronica staggered back, eyes wide with shock. Lily, who was strapped into a car seat behind Emma, began to cry at the commotion. Mark rushed to intervene. Tears burned in Emma's eyes. She realized how easily the veneer of civility had shattered. With a shaking breath, she turned to Mark. "This is exactly why I left," she said through gritted teeth. "There's no peace with you. It's all lies and chaos." And in that moment, Emma vowed she would finalize her decision. It was time to end this toxic circle and protect herself and her child once and for all. That evening, Emma called a divorce attorney in Traverse City named Michael Sanders, recommended by a local acquaintance. She explained her situation, the betrayal, her temporary residence, and her desire to protect Lily. Michael listened patiently, then laid out her options. "Given your circumstances, we can file here in Michigan, provided you establish residency," he explained. "But typically, jurisdiction could be contested by your husband if he files in Illinois. We'll need to act carefully to ensure your rights and Lily's interests are protected." Emma nodded, her hands trembling around the phone. She felt a strange clarity settle over her, like a burden lifting off her shoulders. She would no longer hide. She would fight for her daughter's stability and for her own future. The next day, she met Michael in person. His office was modest but tidy, and Emma found his demeanor reassuring. She handed him a stack of notes and documents she had painstakingly compiled, evidence of Mark's infidelity financial records, Lily's birth certificate. "I have to do this," she said, voice wavering. "I can't live in this in-between anymore." Michael patted her hand. "You're making a brave choice. We'll file the necessary paperwork. Be prepared your husband may contest it, and the process might get messy. But I'll guide you every step of the way." Emma exhaled. "Thank you," she whispered, tears hovering in her eyes. I want peace. for Lily and for myself. When Mark received the divorce papers by courier at his rented cabin, a wave of nausea nearly knocked him off balance. Even though he suspected this outcome, seeing it in black and white was a shock. The words hammered home the finality of what was happening. He hurried to Emma's cottage, ignoring the voice in his head that told him she might slam the door in his face. Aunt Eleanor answered her disapproval as evident as ever, but she allowed him to step inside when he begged for a moment of Emma's time. In the living room, Emma stood with her hands folded, her expression resigned. "You got the papers," she said calmly. Mark lifted the manila envelope. "Is this really what you want?" Emma swallowed her eyes, shimmering with tears she refused to shed. "I don't see any other way. You cheated on me, Mark, and then you brought all that chaos here. I can't expose Lily to that kind of turmoil. She deserves better." He sank onto the sofa, shaking his head. "I know I messed up. I don't expect you to forgive me easily. But can't we try counseling or a trial separation? Do we have to go straight to divorce?" Emma softened for a second, her gaze drifting to the hallway where Lily was playing. "I wish I could say yes," she murmured. "But we tried coexisting. Look what happened. Veronica showed up and it all fell apart again. I can't keep living like this, Mark. My heart is broken. I need to move on." Mark felt tears sting his eyes. "What about custody?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I don't want to lose Lily." Emma's jaw tightened. "We'll figure out an arrangement. She needs her father, but not if it means I'm constantly in agony." Mark nodded, tears slipping down his face. "I understand." He stood clutching the divorce papers as though they weighed 1,000 pounds. Before leaving, he managed a broken whisper. "I'm sorry, Emma. I love you. I always will." She didn't respond as he walked out the door. Only after he left did Emma allow herself the luxury of sinking to the floor, sobbing quietly, while Aunt Eleanor gently stroked her hair. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal filings, mediation sessions, and tense negotiations. Emma insisted on primary custody of Lily, with Mark allowed scheduled visitation. Despite his initial resistance, Mark eventually agreed. He realized that forcing a bitter custody battle would only hurt Lily, and he truly wanted the best for his daughter. Veronica, feeling the sting of rejection and the tarnish to her professional reputation, distanced herself from Mark and eventually left Harper & Green Investments to start over elsewhere. The last Mark heard, she had moved to New York, chasing another career opportunity, leaving Chicago and her entanglement with Mark behind. As the legalities of divorce progressed, Emma found unexpected support in her mother. Linda visited the lakeside cottage, bonding with Lily and offering Emma a shoulder to cry on. Slowly, Emma felt the suffocating pain, ease replaced by a cautious hope for the future. She began exploring freelance writing opportunities online, using her background in communications to earn an income. Mark, too, had to rebuild. He resigned from Harper & Green Investments after the scandal and took a lower-profile position at a smaller firm in the same industry. He attended therapy, trying to unravel the emotional blind spots that had led him astray. Though heartbreak lingered, he found solace in knowing he could still be part of Lily's life, visiting her on weekends and holidays according to the arrangement with Emma. Eventually, the divorce was finalized. The day Emma received the final decree, she stood by the lake once more, the wind ruffling her hair. A sense of bittersweet closure settled over her. She had loved Mark deeply, and part of her always would, but she understood now that love alone could not fix everything. Lily toddled up to her, holding a shiny pebble in her small hand. "For you, Mummy," she said, her eyes bright. Emma knelt down, taking the pebble and pulling Lily into a gentle hug. "Thank you, sweetheart," she whispered. "It's beautiful." In the distance, Aunt Eleanor watched with a soft smile. She remembered the frightened woman who had appeared on her doorstep all those months ago, searching for refuge. Now Emma stood taller, more assured, despite the heartbreak she had endured. That evening, Emma sat down at her laptop, beginning the process of searching for a place of her own, not too far from Aunt Eleanor's property. She wanted Lily to grow up surrounded by the serenity of nature, but she also needed to carve out an independent life. The phone rang a call from Mark. He was scheduled to see Lily that weekend. Emma's hand hovered over the phone for a moment before she answered. Their conversation was polite, cordial even. In that measured exchange, Emma recognized that while their romantic relationship might be irreparably broken, they could still strive for an amicable partnership as parents. And so life began anew for Emma Davenport, no longer a suburban wife living under the illusion of marital bliss, but a single mother forging her own path, confident in her ability to protect the tiny life in her care, and determined to heal her own wounded heart. This was the story of a shocking betrayal, a bold escape, and one mother's steadfast resolve to protect her child at all costs. Emma's world turned upside down the moment she discovered her husband in that hotel lobby. Yet she found the strength to leave and start over, even when her heart still ached with love and loss. Through family solitude and a fierce commitment to her daughter, she carved a new path for them both.